Welcome to Research Perch from the Massage Therapy Foundation. Short, practical insights into massage therapy research and how it can benefit your practice.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Research Perch. I'm Michael Reynolds, the chair of the marketing committee for the Massage Therapy Foundation, and we're glad you're joining us again. Research Perch, as you know, is where we unpack articles from the International Journal of Therapeutic Massage and Bodywork and bring them to you in hopefully a lively, fun format, also informative format. So that's what we're here for. And the Massage Therapy Foundation is at massagetherapyfoundation.org, and the journal is at ijtmb.org. So that's where we take our articles. So here, as always, with Ruth Werner and Nikki Monk. Nikki, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks, Michael.
You and I have scratchy voice today, I know, because our allergies are acting up. So if one of us coughs and loses our voice today, we know it's the changing weather is to blame. So Ruth, how about you? You doing well?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here in our nation's capital, getting ready for the Fascia Congress this week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. I love DC. Great.
Oh,
great
me
town.
too. It's a really nice place to visit.
Great town. All right. Well, let's get started today. So today's topic is the article is titled Relief from Back Pain Through Postural Adjustment, a Controlled Clinical Trial of the Immediate Effect of Muscular Chains Therapy, MCT in parentheses. So back pain, that feels like that's right in the wheelhouse of massage therapy, right?
It most certainly is. And let's really quickly too highlight that Dr. Rosario is actually from a physical therapy context. So he's a physical therapist who also does, he's a PhD PT down in Brazil.
Okay. Awesome. So tell us, who wants to get started, and tell us kind of what the gist of this particular article is all about.
Well, I'd love to launch us in because there are some things sort of deep in this paper that I'm hoping Nikki will help us all to understand.
I'm sure she will. She's very good at that.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. So the basic premise behind this project is that postural problems cause pain. And one of the things that this researcher had to defend is that idea, that we can assign causality to back pain because of people's distorted posture. And he did a nice argument he did a nice job of framing that argument. The next thing he did was propose that a particular modality called muscular chain therapy might be a good way to interrupt the link between postural problems and pain. And I'm not going to do justice to trying to describe what muscular chain therapy really is, because the main descriptions of this technique were actually in previous papers that we didn't publish and that I haven't read. So he refers to those a lot in terms of describing what he was doing. But I'd say that it's fair to say that the basic idea is that the muscles that help us to hold posture, he calls them anti-gravitational muscles, from top to bottom, in superior to inferior, run in chains of activity. And when you have a problem in one area, it can cause problems in distant areas. And this won't be a new idea to massage therapists. We deal with this sort of thing all the time. I don't, again, not qualified to say if this connects to, say, a Tom Myers model of anatomy trains, but I certainly felt some reverberation of that idea, just looking at the body as a unified whole with some predictable patterns of disruption. So it's a nice-sized randomized controlled trial. He had 100 subjects between the ages of 20 and 39. And he divided them into two groups. He describes very precisely how he divides them. He each picked up a folded piece of paper out of a bowl that had 3 letters on it, and they were assigned to groups based on what letters they got. And one group got the muscular chain therapy, and the other group got sham ultrasound. And the sham ultrasound it doesn't describe the administrator of the ultrasound. It just says they were hooked up and with an ultrasound machine that was not actually plugged in, but the person administering the session used gel, and they used the probe over the area of pain, going slowly back and forth, and that the person receiving that control intervention didn't know that that the machine was not actually working. Interestingly, he doesn't say that the administrators of it didn't know, so it was probably only single-blinded at that point. And the outcome was, I thought, really pretty interesting, which is that both groups reported a significant drop in their pain for this one session. This is only testing one session, and it's immediately comparing pre-session 10-point scale pain reports to post-session. Both groups had a drop in pain, but not surprisingly, the group that got the intervention, the muscular chain therapy, reported a very significantly higher or more substantial drop in pain levels. And so the conclusion is that this is an intervention that could conceivably help with back pain. We're going to have Nikki help us to understand, the numerical way in which he reports this. But there are some other things that I was, that I think are maybe weaknesses or lacking in this report that I'd like to discuss too.
Ooh, can I jump in for a minute first before we get to Nikki? I'm excited because I'm going to kind of fast forward to the end of the movie here, I guess, but we'll back up, I know. But at the conclusion, it says it is possible to, I've never seen this before. In all these research purchases we've done, I always see the conclusion is like very careful, like, oh, well, maybe, more study needed and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. At the end of this one, it says it is possible to conclude that one MCT session is an effective treatment of undiagnosed spinal musculoskeletal pain. And that, in the context of all these articles we've studied and done research purchases on before, that seems pretty strong. Like that's the strongest I've seen, right?
Well, it is a strong statement, and I would say it's a strong overstatement.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I was getting too excited. Okay.
No, because among other things, Michael, the main thing is this is a post-test, like you get up off the table, how is your pain now, Mr. Reynolds? And so we have no sense of longevity of effect. We have no sense of what happens when people get back into their activities of daily living. It was really it was one session immediately post-treatment. And so we could find probably a similar conclusion for just resting, for stretching, for yoga, for all kinds of
things, fair enough.
Right? So his concluding statement was not incorrect, but it was, I think it's fair to say, an overstatement. And there may be a cultural issue there. Let's remember this is probably all translated from Portuguese.
Potentially.
Okay, good point.
Well, and so I want to highlight first one of the things that Ruth brought up at the beginning, and this was not really being able to say what it is that was being done here, what MCT actually is. And Ruth referred to the fact that the authors do say, as previously described in other work. Well, Ruth, I did look. I went and I found the articles and I read them.
Good for you.
And the thing is that, the thing that really troubled me is the first article that was referred to, the main one, says that the technique, the way of assessment was described in detail. Well, no, in that original paper even that he's referring back to, it was said as described by, in that paper too, to some different papers, and those texts were actually in a different language. Mm-hmm. So then I couldn't go back and see. So fundamentally, anybody who wanted to be able to replicate this or put these pieces into practice don't know what this is at all. Not only doesn't know what the treatment was, we can, like as you say, we can assume that there's some pieces parallel to Meyer's work. And in fact, I believe he even refers back to some of the pieces from Anatomy Trains, and that might be one of the citations in here. Rats. So
no, but it would be impossible to replicate this because we just don't know enough about what was done.
Right, and it also resonates a lot with yoga to me. Mm-hmm. So because they're doing these poses. One of the things that I do like though, poses, right, and they were given 1 to 2 poses. But what was really nice was that it does reflect the individualization that can happen in treatment, because it wasn't just everybody got this pose or that pose, even though we don't know what those poses are. But it was said, if these people had this or that, then a different
analyze for what the the biggest weakness was in these
Right.
various chains, and they chose 2 poses for each client in
Right.
the intervention group to address what they were working with. And I like what you said about individualizing. I just wish we
Right.
had
Yes, so
a nice resource to find out what they actually did.
right. Well, and it seems as though there is a systematic process by which they are determining, if this, then that, then this is what we're going to do. But there's no way that we can find it, and we don't know what that is. So that's one of the most troubling things, just initially about the article. But then, as we then start looking at, okay, now we're going to compare these 2 pieces. So they do have this treatment that was administered. And then we can assume that it was done systematically, or that we're asked to assume that it was done systematically and it was applied evenly for the folks. And then we're going to compare that to, they described the ultrasound treatment as a placebo. And one of the things that I do want to point out is that he does a nice job later in the discussion about highlighting how placebo supposedly is this inert something or other, but there's a lot of research out there that shows that placebo has an effect. I mean, it has a benefit in 20 to 40%. They cite,
right.
And
it was
trial pieces, right? And so this is why you still do something, because the mind has, the mind can do things. But then there's also this idea of there was a person with this individual applying the treatment, and there was some contact to skin, and so who knows? Was it the attention? What have you? So this just thinking about the difference between an inert treatment or a placebo treatment. And so this is why we, of course, want to compare these pieces, right? So let's get to the analysis plan. He does a couple of interesting things here, and I think that there were a couple of missed opportunities in how to really use this data and talk about it in a really meaningful way. So the first piece was first, when you have 2 groups like this, even though you're randomly assigning things, you want to look and make sure that their baselines are the same and that there's still an even distribution that's happening. And so the initial statistics and results that they're talking about are just making sure that the division between the genders and the division between the ages were the same, and they were. So they did these chi-squares. It's just a way of looking at data that are categorical and seeing if they're significantly different, and they weren't.
Okay, so I just want to recap that for our readers who are new to this language. So I said chi-square as we were preparing for this, which revealed me for a newbie. So is it fair to say then that when we read about chi-squares, it's really about testing the randomization?
No, not
okay,
necessarily.
never mind then.
But that was just a chi-square is a type of test.
Okay.
And so it's basically, and a chi-square is going to be categorical, and in most cases, a chi-square is 2 by 2. So you've got gender, male, female, versus which group, group A, group B.
Right.
And they're looking to see if the distribution amongst all those different groups are even. And then
so you might have, below BMI, above BMI, or length of time people have been sick, or any number of things that you're looking for. Okay.
Yeah. And so when you're looking at dichotomous data like that, or categorical data like that, this particular test can tell you if there's statistically significant differences between these groups. So say, for instance, you have somebody that received massage therapy, yes, received massage therapy, no. Okay. And then you have that they had clinically meaningful change, yes, clinically meaningful change, no. Okay. And then you would just plug in the numbers, okay? And then you do this chi-square test, and it'll tell you if the proportion of people who had the treatment and had clinically meaningful change was significantly bigger than those who didn't have the treatment. That's the test that you would use, statistically speaking. Okay, so, all right. So they applied all of that. They applied that test simply to just make sure that, okay, these groups, according to age and gender, were evenly distributed. Yes, fine. So now
those were their categories that they were looking at.
Yes.
Okay.
They also wanted to make sure that the baseline mean for the groups were the same. So they had to make sure that they were saying that they were in as much pain.
They were in roughly the same amount of pain with roughly the same amount of statistical deviation on either side of the mean.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
Okay.
for each of the groups to begin with. So they did that. Done. Now, they had, for their big outcomes, they had 2 tests that they wanted to do. They did 2 t-tests, essentially. The first test they wanted to do was within groups. So they only looked at the people who had the placebo, and they only looked at the people who had the treatment. Okay, and they wanted to see pre-post if there was significant change that occurred.
All right. So is that called an unpaired t-test then?
That is a paired t-test
because
it's pre-post.
Pre-post, but it's within the group. It's not between the groups.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a pair. There's a pair there.
A pair of data points.
This data is related to this data.
Okay.
So paired. And they found with that there was significant change that happened in both those who had the treatment and those who didn't.
Right.
So now the next step then that they take is to look and see the mean at the end of those who had the treatment and those who didn't, if those are significantly different statistically.
From the means in the pre-tests. Oh wait, no. Sorry.
They were just looking at the end means, and they were saying that
for
those
the intervention group and the sham group.
Oh, actually, you know what? I just did that wrong. They looked at the change. They looked at the change to see if they were different.
Okay.
But the thing that I want to get at here is they did 2 separate tests to do this. Okay. And truly they should have done a little bit more complicated test and just did one. And to say all the way around if this was meaningfully different. And it also would have made it a little bit cleaner. And what it also would have done would be controlling for baseline, so the pre for both groups. So I don't want to get all into that because I could talk math all through it, and I would love it, and everybody would fall asleep, and it wouldn't matter. But what it does come down to is the magnitude of change for those who had the treatment was bigger. Okay.
Right. Substantially bigger.
Statistically, yes.
Okay.
And so, but what does that mean? Because if there was just all they were looking at was the actual mean scores, and it didn't look at this on an individual level. And so it doesn't take into account those who perhaps changed, their change constituted a 20% or 50% or 60% versus somebody who maybe had higher pain to begin with, and they still had high pain, but it wasn't proportionally as much change, which would be more meaningful. So they sort of start getting at that when they look at these first. You have these tables that has how many people in each group said at the beginning that they had a 10 on the analog scale, a 9, an 8, a 7.
Yeah, I liked that. I thought that was really.
It's very descriptively. It is descriptively rich. It is. It's really, really interesting. And I think though, if they had done some combining of these categories, that it would have been a lot more interesting story to tell. And especially if you put those pieces together, because they actually could have done chi-square tests on this. Because here again, and now all they're doing is they're just sort of doing this descriptive piece, like this many people saw improvement in this group. So like 96%.
96% of the people. So here, Michael, here's what you're waiting for.
Yeah. So 96% of the people that had the treatment had some improvement. Only 36% of the other group had some improvement.
Now that I can understand. Yes.
They only talked about that from a descriptive standpoint. They did no statistical test on that, but they didn't do a statistical test on that. And that's something that they could have done very easily, and they should have done, and they should have defended that, because that would have been something that would be meaningful. One, because it would talk about what change was, and you could also do, so all they say is that there was some change, some change for the better. So that could have been maybe a 1% change for the better, or one little jump, or it could have been completely better.
I see. So let me try and rephrase what your frustration is that in the data we have after the intervention, we see that almost everybody had improvement. One person had no change. One person actually got a little worse. Okay.
In the treatment group, yeah.
In the treatment group. And we have in the chart how many people reported as their post measure 0 and how many reported, and on up,
Mhm.
right? But what we don't know is where they were at the beginning. And so it
Right.
may be what we're missing from this is understanding if someone was, had reported 8 in the pre-test and 0 in the post-test. That's a huge change.
That's 100% improvement.
Right. As opposed to someone who reported, say, a 4 in the pre-test and a 2 in the post-test.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And so it becomes something that makes it a little more interesting. And you guys have heard me talk over and over and over again about patient-centered outcomes.
Yes.
And clinically meaningful change and clinically meaningful differences are different sort of sometimes from statistical meaning. Okay.
Right.
And so, and that's the thing I think that is missing here, and they miss out on a really great opportunity to do. And they are very technical in their writing, which is perfectly fine. But I think it loses a lot of people when they start talking about we can reject the null here and the equality between values cannot be. That becomes very confusing. Rather than just saying there's a statistical difference between pre and post for each group when considered alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's so. Little plain English.
Yeah, well, I'm with you again because for our audience at least, the how they chose to interpret the numbers and how they chose to to report their numbers is sort of beyond my ken. What I want to know is how do I help my client who has back pain?
Right.
And so, I think it's pretty great that they had 96% of the people in the intervention report some improvement, and that overall, let's see, the mean pre-test in the intervention group was 5.52 on a 10-point scale, and the mean post-test was 1.5 on the 10-point scale, and that to me, I know it's all in statistics, but it seems to me that that has to also reflect some clinical importance as well, or some.
Well, and that's group change, right? Yeah, that's that's group mean change. So what would have been really interesting to know, what was the mean individual change?
Yeah. Oh, that would be really
per person. What was that percentage? What was the percentage point that they got better? What was that mean? And then
so that's like the change of the change, right?
Well, it is, but but there again, it's looking at the individual,
right?
Rather than and the mean is important, absolutely. When you're looking at statistics, it's important, but when you're looking at patient-centered outcomes, it's more who had meaningful change. And so then to be able to get to that dichotomy again, so now of those 96%, who got 20% better? Who got 50% better?
Right.
And that's just a yes, no.
And where did they start?
Right.
Yeah.
and that's always going to take into account because it's 50% better, right? It's always going to take into the baseline into account. And so then if you took all of those who were in the treatment group versus those who were in the placebo group and look to see, was there a difference between groups of those who got 20%? That's an easy chi-square test. Boom. And that would be clinically meaningful. And that would say a lot for this particular treatment, especially at this level of research. I mean, even though this is great, it's a randomized controlled trial, and it has a pretty good size N, but it's still pretty early on in the research, right?
So we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah.
But I want to, I just want to sort of ask the question: at what point can a researcher, let's see, in order for them to do this in the way that you have just suggested, they would have had to plan that into their research design at the beginning, right? It's not something where you can go back to the researchers and say, I really want you to redo your stats and give me this information instead.
Well, no, I mean, you can do secondary data analysis. It may not be something that you're doing.
I just didn't know what I was describing.
So. Yeah. That's, a lot of times it's secondary data analysis, and that's when so you have your main piece that you're looking for, and that would be the mean changes, the group changes. Those are the very straightforward stats. Then the secondary analysis is going to be looking for the clinically meaningful change, and that could be your secondary hypotheses. You can develop those, especially based on your initial piece, and you can have that be exploratory, secondary, what have you. And I would not have felt uncomfortable saying, hey, look at your data this way. I've had lots of reviewers send things back to me saying, you need to consider this covariate or something, or try looking at your data this way. So yeah.
Thanks. I feel
Well,
like I understand that a little better now. Michael, how about you?
I understood a good portion of it.
Good. I'm realizing,
lots of yeah, go ahead, Nikki.
but I'm realizing too, I'm pretty sure I got my paired stuff backwards. So when everybody comes back and busts me on, you're not talking about your stats right, I own it. I screwed
Well,
that.
Nikki, I was about to call you out on that. I was like, Nikki got those backwards, and I'm not going to let her get away with it. So with that, I do appreciate you boiling it down for me as well, and kind of anchoring me in what outcomes to look for there. So I appreciate that. So thank you both. So obviously a great a lot of depth here to this one, and sounds like there's some stuff you'd like to follow up on as well, some more data. So
yeah,
appreciate the discussion today on this particular article. And again, if you want to search for it, we do encourage our listeners to go search for it and read the entire text. If you search for probably muscular change therapy in the search bar on igtmb.org, it should pop right up, and you can download it and read the full text there as well. So,
hey, Michael, how much would that cost?
Let's see. I believe it is. It's free. That's right.
Oh, what a deal!
It is free 99.
Free
99.
The 99 is waived. So articles, it's a good point. Articles on igtmb.org are free. We encourage you to subscribe, and you get access to all of them. So great point, Ruth. Thank you. So Ruth, thank you so much. Nikki, thank you as well for the great discussion today. And thanks again for our listeners for joining us. Please continue to visit us online at massagetherapyfoundation.org. And if you're listening via podcast, awesome. We appreciate that. You can also view us on our blog. And if you're watching via blog, don't forget you can subscribe via iTunes or Stitcher. So lots of ways to get a hold of us.
And leave us some comments too.
Yes, please. We love comments. We appreciate that. So
yeah, Nikki, talk your stats right. That's a good
yeah, everyone call Nikki out on her stats every chance you get. So all right. Well, thank you both. It's been a pleasure, and thanks everyone for joining us. And
Thanks,
we
Michael.
will see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Research Perch. Please send feedback or questions to perch@massagetherapyfoundation.org. See you next time.